For the light makes everything visible. This is why it is said, "Awake, O sleeper, rise up from the dead, and Christ will give you light." Ephesians chapter 5, verse 14. Welcome back to Life with the Liz and Bees, Season 2, Episode 2, and I think we have a tagline for this season, you guys, because the theme that the Lord keeps bringing through these testimonies and interviews that I have been doing is from Ephesians chapter 5, verse 14, and this verse talks all about waking up, O sleeper, and so our tagline for this season is, "Wake up, O sleeper. Rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you." So dive in with us to part 2 of Amanda's testimony today, and I know that it's going to bless you. As a disclaimer that we're going to be sharing at the beginning of every podcast, we believe that God can use all forms that He chooses to heal people. So this includes the powerful biopsychosocial spiritual model. I'm a psychology major, and so that's something that I studied very well in school. And so what this means is that God can use spiritual disciplines such as prayer, solitude, fasting, etc., to help someone walk out their healing. Or God can use medications, personal counseling, and coaching to help someone walk out their healing. And so you're going to hear a variety of testimonies to come forth of people that have walked out their healing in all different ways in the biopsychosocial spiritual model. And so I am now, I can say this now, I am now a credentialed Dream Mentors biblical life coach. I just finished my 15-week coaching program. And so really my desire after going through the program is I want to see people saved, healed, and delivered through any way that God personally chooses to lead them and to heal them. And so Hunter's also going to be going through the Dream Mentors program. We're continuing our education in other ways. I'm taking on clients every single month, intimately one-on-one right now, that are wanting to have a transformation to understand who they are in Christ, why God created them, what His plan is for them, and how they can live out their God-given destiny. So if you're listening to this and you want to be a part of our soul transformation coaching program here at Dream Mentors Biblical Life Coaching Institute, then I would love to get you connected into it, and I would love to be your coach. So you can just send an email to lifewithlizandbees@gmail.com or reach out to me personally over on Instagram, and I would love to support you. So as we kick off the podcast today, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. You're going to hear powerful testimonies to come, and we would appreciate your feedback following the episode over on Instagram or here on the podcast. If you can leave a review, that would be so appreciated. Next kind of like testimony and direction that we'd love to like bring attention to and to share is about Allie Jean, and would love for you to share about Alana and kind of share about her, and then also share about your second baby, Allie Jean, and just kind of go into, I'll never forget the day that we were upstairs, you were counting, because you were counting the money, the tithe money, and I'm like walking in the hallway and you're like, "Psst, Sammy, I'm pregnant. Don't tell anybody." And that was, you had done that twice with Alana with me because I was pregnant, and you're like, "We haven't announced yet." And then with Allie Jean and I were just remember because we were so close in that pregnancy, how close we were, and just rejoicing with you and being so excited for you. And from that moment on, I'd love for you even to share like what your pregnancy had looked like with her and what you guys found out. So dive into Allie Jean's testimony because our listeners are going to be really encouraged by the end of this.
Well, first I do want to back up just a little bit. So we struggled to get pregnant with Alana. Wow. So we started trying in 2020, just COVID and, all the things, and we're married, we want a kid, and we struggled for 12 months. And so that was a little bit of a rough season. And I can tell you another thing, just to kind of bring this full circle, right? The enemy wants to bring up something from the past and make me believe that, the abortion could have impacted me not getting pregnant. And that's a lie, right? Like we've walked through healing. Jesus has blotted out my sin. And so I was able to remind myself of like just staying in the light, right? If we just continue to walk in his light, he's going to give us the power to recognize where the enemy is telling us lies. So we struggled getting pregnant with Alana, our firstborn. And then once we were pregnant, we were very excited and walked through a non-medicated birth, which is a huge thing that Sammy and I both share a passion for. So love those conversations. And then we decided to start trying again. We knew we did not want Alana to be an only child, and we also knew we are not getting any younger. So yes, women can have children, well through their 40s. I just didn't necessarily want to be one of them.
I love that once you reach past 35, they consider you like not able to have children. And it's like, what? Like,
but the nice thing is they don't.
That rule.
You still can go non-medicated. Like you still don't have to go to a hospital. So it's not, the only risk factor, but they do count your age as like 3 points.
They consider you. So are you past the age of 35 now?
So I turned 37 in August. Yeah.
Oh
yeah,
my, I still like, I talk to you like we're both 26, like all the time, forgetting you're a decade older than me.
I try to pretend that I'm not a decade older than you, but I absolutely am.
We just connect on that level. So, okay.
Anyways, yeah. When you said 20 years, I'm like, oh my gosh, my story does span over like 20 years. What is happening? Anyways, real life, but I thank God for everything we've been through, for every wrinkle, for every scar, all of it. I love getting older. I think, we learn and we grow and we keep walking the journey in the time that God has called us for. So getting older is a beautiful thing. But
yeah. And now you've reached this point in your life. So you've had Alana, you had a beautiful pregnancy and birth with her. You've got to get pregnant again. And what did that
go
look like?
Right back to the birth center because that's where we want to be. And we've established a relationship there, and we're excited, and we're going to walk this out exactly kind of how we walked it out with Alana until the 20-week anatomy scan. We show up. I generally speaking remember dates really well. So June 29th, 2023. We're driving on the way. All the parents talk about what gender they want. So we're like, oh, we hope it's a little boy. We have a little girl, a little boy would be great. And if we ever have a third, either way, we don't care, right? So we're driving and we're talking, and we're a little bit, I'm like anxious. If it's a girl, of course, he's going to be fine. He's wonderful. And we get there and she puts the gel and stuff on my stomach, and immediately it's a girl. And so I'm like processing it. He's smiling. He's so sweet. Ugh, love that guy. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I don't know. I start thinking about names while we're like there. But at not one point did my mind go to anything could be wrong. I don't know. I just always have these, I don't want to say necessarily rose colored glasses, but I just always have this like, sunshine and rainbows, things are going to be good. And then she takes a little longer than I expected. And I see Ken, like he's a little bit more of a realist. And I see him kind of like wondering what they're trying to look at. And they bring somebody else in to look. And then they both walk out and they leave Ken and I in this room. And he's like, I think something's wrong. And so immediately I'm like, okay, well, maybe it's a kidney. Maybe it's something that's not, a major concern. And they bring us in. I opened the door at one point because I'm like, this is getting ridiculous. Like I'm, stressing out a little bit. And they basically tell us, close the door. We're not ready for you. And then she brings us into her office and has us sit down and explains. She just starts drawing a diagram of the heart. And she tells us that the heart is supposed to have 4 chambers and they can only see 2. And so she says, we think this is HLHS, which stands for hypoplastic left heart syndrome. And she tells us that she doesn't know if the baby will survive it. that we have options such as abortion. She tells us a number of things about the umbilical cord and a lot of things that like at the time I didn't understand. And I was like confused, right? Like what, why? I'm not really processing, but and then she immediately goes into you need to transfer care. And that's where I got very stern and was like, I'm not ready. We need to get the echo, which she had mentioned. Let's get an echo ultrasound and really look at the heart and see where we're at. And then I'll decide on where my care is going to be because the one thing I didn't want was a hospital birth. And so we go to this echo appointment. They confirm, but then sitting in a conference room, this is a man of faith, a man who believes in our Lord and Savior. And he tells us with HLHS, so many babies survive this and thrive. Like, and we have, God puts you in the right place, right? We have 3 families within our church who have children with HLHS and they're incredible kiddos. So, and I know 2 of them personally. So we just had a lot of confidence, a lot of questions, a lot of you know, where do we go with this news? But like God's gonna walk us through it. We're gonna be okay. And I really felt like Allie Jean was gonna be okay, you know.
There's so many things like from what you just said that I want to point out. So I'm going to try to remember one of the biggest ones. What did you feel in that moment when you're sitting in there? So this is your 20-week appointment and they are giving you your options and the option of abortion comes up for 20 weeks.
Yeah. I paid no attention. Like I didn't say anything to her about it, but I was furious, especially, it's one thing when like in the world, I recognize like we have different values walking in Christ than maybe the world does. But coming from a doctor, regardless of your values, like this baby's kicking around in my womb. Like it is shocking that they don't that the medical world does not claim that this is a life.
Yeah.
It's shocking and it's sad, and then I was even more furious just about the idea of it when I found out that there's so many children who thrive with HLHS. So why was that on the table? Like this wasn't like 100% a case where there are medical cases where you birth for comfort care and
Mhm.
you hold your baby until your baby passes, but this was not with only HLHS. This was not one of those cases. It
Right.
wasn't until later that Allie Jean had more diagnoses that led to other things, but at this point in the pregnancy it should not have been even mentioned. And I can also say it was never mentioned again by anyone.
Mm, wow. Because that really stuck out to me that, that was brought up, as an option for you, knowing God positioned you at Relevant to be surrounded by multiple families that had children that were living well, incredible lives with this heart condition. From that moment then of finding out of the diagnosis, so 20 to 40 weeks, what transpired in that 20-week time frame? Did you have more feelings of hope and like, we're going to birth this baby and she's going to live with this? Or were you wrestling with, I don't know if she's going to make it when she's born?
I had all of the hope. I didn't, there was one conversation that Ken and I acknowledged that, something could go wrong. But I believe that about everything in life, right? Like we're not guaranteed tomorrow. And
Yep.
so I was okay with that. The acknowledgement of it was absolutely fine, but I won't stay there.
Mm,
I refuse to stay there because even knowing what I know today, I'm glad I didn't stay there because I enjoyed every minute of her pregnancy. And I wrote letters to her. I have a journal. I have learned so much about my own anatomy because of Allie Jean's life that things about my own heart that I never knew. And I'm like, goodness, like we should have to study our anatomy a little bit more, or maybe
should.
pass school to pass it. I don't know. um,
I love what you just said about acknowledging the reality of what can happen, but not allowing that to consume your life, your everyday life, right? Like that is powerful right there. Having an assumption of what an outcome could be, but continuing to have hope, and believing that the outcome could be different. So then tell us about your birth story with Allie Jean and giving birth to her.
You have another 2 hours. So no,
Let's
uh,
do it.
so I will say, going through the birth center style birth where an epidural is not an option, I grieved this birth with Allie Jean. I grieved her birth hard because I recognize now the likelihood of being induced is high. The likelihood of so many things, like this is a medical baby, so we're going to have a lot of medical interventions, and I just was like up in arms, like how this is gonna look. But my birth was beautiful. I mean, we have a video, we haven't posted it yet. We need to, but we have a cute video of Ken and I doing a baby belly dance with me hooked up to every monitor you can imagine, and I'm on pitocin and nailing the contractions. I have all the support system behind me to like do those hip squeezes that I needed and power through those contractions. And I didn't ask for the epidural in this birth either. And the reason why I say it in that way and why I think it's important, especially with this medical baby, was the moment she was born, every piece of my body worked. Like I could stand up, I could move around. And if anything, if this baby needed me, if Allie needed me in a different room of the hospital, in a different place, yes, they make you sit in a wheelchair, but I could move if I needed to. And that was super important to me, with this birth specifically. It was important to me with Alana as well, but with this birth because I felt like Allie needed me more. And so as hard as I thought it would be being in a hospital, in no labor tub, right? We love the labor tub, didn't have that option here. The birth was absolutely beautiful.
It's crazy, right? When you think about having to be in two totally different settings for, like if Allie Jean was your first baby before Alana, right? Like things would have maybe looked so differently. You know what I mean? In terms of like your understanding of birth or whatever, the birth experience could have been like, but because you had the experience you did with Alana, which is similar to my birth experiences where it's like out of the hospital and you get to call the shots and you get to birth how you want to, and then grieving the
Yeah.
birth process this time and how hard that probably was getting ready and anticipation, for this birth. And so it's so miraculous, though, to hear about birthing her in a setting you weren't comfortable with, that you really didn't want to be in, but you knew it was what was best for her to get the care that she needed. And you were willing to do whatever it took. Still, through that, like you were able to have such a miraculous birth, which just goes to show the Lord being over this entire situation to support you. I remember talking to you the day after, I'm like, how are you feeling? And like all of this. And you're like, girl, I can't wait to tell you the birth story. And I'm like, oh, thank God. Like it went amazing. You know what I mean? So that's just a breath of fresh air. And so Allie's born. And then what happens after Allie's born?
So um they take her. I had asked if I could hold her, do the skin to skin, right? We get that with the uh, birthing center births. And so immediately though, the doctor, and thankfully initially I was a little unsure of how the doctor and I would do, the OB, because they have a different mindset than I do with birth. But I'm like, listen, don't cut that cord, don't do these things. But I felt that she knew something was wrong, and she gave Allie Jean to the NICU nurse. And so dad did get to cut the cord, but we did it very quickly, and she ended up needing to be intubated. And I didn't consider it right then and there, but that's probably the point where the doctors recognize that something else might be going on, because intubation for a heart baby, I don't think, I hope I'm not misspeaking here, but I don't think that's normally the first thing that they recognize needs to happen. So at this point, the doctors are really trying to figure out what else is going on and why did we have to intubate so quickly for her breathing. And so the next day, she was born at 6:04 p.m. And the next day around noon, maybe a little earlier, the heart doctor came into our room and we were getting ready to go over to her side of the side of the hospital. But he comes in to let us know that there's a second diagnosis, a second big diagnosis. There's actually a lot of diagnoses, but this one is taking precedence because it relates to her lungs. And so he shares with us that she has a diaphragmatic hernia and her liver had escaped through a hole in her diaphragm and the liver had attached itself to one of her lungs. And so her lung didn't grow properly. And so now he tells us that this hospital that we're in is not suited for this diagnosis. And here we are believing we're in the best place for her heart condition. And now we're being told she can't stay here. Like she needs to transfer.
It's such a roller coaster of so much hope to then
Mhm.
being like so heartbroken to then probably being like, okay, now what do we do about it? Like, is that where your head was at? Like, okay, this is the reality. Now, what are we supposed to do about it? Like, what's the next step from here? What was the action that you guys took after that diagnosis?
So we get down to her room and uh the team who's there to transport her is already there moving wires. Like even though we hadn't signed consent forms yet, like they were positive this is what's in the best interest of this child. And so they, as soon as we get down there, they basically pull Ken aside, have him sign those consent papers to transfer her. And we recognize like this makes sense. Of course, another thing, another curveball is what we were calling them, another curveball, an Alley Jean curveball thrown at us, but we're gonna keep trusting. We're gonna keep walking every day out that we get with her, with God. And that's really truly what we were doing each day and with each new piece of information that we were given.
So then she gets transferred to another hospital local in Tampa, right?
Yeah, she was transferred to St. Pete All Children's, which is another, a little bit of a curveball for us because it's further, right? But God is he's just so good. This hospital has Ronald McDonald House associated, and they came in and just loved on us. And we went in there saying, look, we know that the mileage from our home to this hospital is longer than what we were expecting with the medical baby, but we understand if there are parents like from out of town, we don't want to take up any space. And they were just so gracious and so kind and fed us and nurtured us and they told us we will make sure every parent who needs a place to stay has a place. And so it was just Ronald McDonald House does a wonderful thing over there. So we absolutely love them. But so she transfers and we follow. And I also want to note here, because I didn't have the epidural, I was able to leave the hospital less than 24 hours after birth. They signed a form letting me go.
Mm, praise
Because
God.
I do believe I had an epidural, I would have still been having side effects. And so it was, it was God's provision that I didn't and that I was able to walk out, and go home, pack a bag and head over to St. Pete that same evening.
So then there's what, probably 5 or 6 days in between from her birth to so much new information coming. So as new information is getting thrown at you guys, where are you at in that waiting season? What are your days looking like at this point as you're at the hospital with her waiting for the next course of action?
So for me, I like learning and I want to learn more about these conditions and these diagnoses that they're telling us about. And so the doctors and the nurses are walking us through. I'm learning what every monitor she's hooked up to, what every every bag of medicine that's going into her body through IVs. Like I'm just wanting to learn and absorb. So I have a journal that I just kept. And it was really nice because during this time, I felt so at peace and comfort with where Alana was and how my family was really rallying behind us to where I could focus on Allie Jean. And so, you know, yes, it is, you're operating a lot on adrenaline. Like, God kind of gives us some natural things to operate out of. And then we made the decision to go public via a Facebook group with all of her diagnosis, and we rallied a bunch of prayer warriors. And Sammy, I felt covered. I felt the Lord was like, allowing us to just, take the information that was as it was coming, to absorb what we could learn and to pass off what we didn't fully understand. And we felt covered from our community around us.
Well, you were covered. I can't even tell you how many group chats I was in and sending it out to people and sharing it. And me and Lily turning on worship music and just crying out to God, asking for a miracle for those few days as you guys were just really, really waiting. So it is so encouraging, to hear that, because all of our listeners need to know, when you go through those seasons, you need to have a community, and you need to have prayer warriors that are going to step in for you, and intercede for you and be warriors for you, to cry out to God, on behalf of you, so that you can be present in the moment that you need to be present on. And so I'm so glad, and even encouraged hearing that, of how covered you guys did feel as you were walking that out.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it to ask for prayer is, just to ask people to partner with you and to go to the Lord, on behalf of our family and behalf of our baby. And so, I think it's really important to surround yourself with a community of people. And these are, imperfect people, right? Like, we're all walking a journey called life, and there could be hurts along the way, but that community is still so important. Like, we were not meant to walk this journey alone.
No, not.
Also, I also think here, is a good time to mention, like, a lot of Christians you might hear use the saying, like, God doesn't give us too much we can handle. And that is it. Just I think you can, just from hearing me speak, like, that is false. I understand the sentiment behind it, but God 100% allows more than we can handle. And the purpose of that is so that we trust him, because
Yep.
we're not doing this on our own. That's not the intent, isn't to lean on ourselves. The intent is to lean into who God is and why he created us. And I think in America, we have this ability to kind of make ourselves mini gods because
Yep.
we have a roof over our head, the air conditioning, the food on our table. And so we forget that we need him. And in that, life circumstances are going to be thrown at you that you can't handle, and that is okay. We're not supposed to handle it, and that is why we lean on Jesus Christ.
That is a word right there, Amanda. You are preaching when you speak about that specifically. And I love that you just shared that and that you just brought it up, because anybody can look from an outside perspective to what happened, in you and your family, but you were the one that was walking in it and living in it and having to surrender and partner to the Lord through this. And so you know that you had to submit entirely, and that you were going to get so many things that you would feel in the natural that you can't carry and you can't handle it. And just like you said, that's where, when Jesus lives in us, right? The Holy Spirit comes alive and he's like, I'll take that burden, and I'll take that burden, and I'll take that weight off of you. Like, don't you worry. It's like Jesus is always behind us, like dragging, to make sure that we don't feel the weight of having to carry it all on our own. But absolutely, he's going to put us through things, and we're going to go through things in life where it is going to be so much more than we can handle in the natural. But in the heavenly places and in the spiritual, God's like, I've got you, like truly. So Allie Jean's testimony, her testimony is just getting started. It's not even finished, but I'd love for you to share, leading up to your final moments with her and just kind of sharing with people what that looked like leading up to that day, and then what the Lord has since done from that day, and how her testimony is truly just getting started here on earth.
So I don't believe that, you know, that like God, we knew and we know today that had God chosen to heal her, he absolutely could have. We believe that with everything in us, but there are times where he chooses not to heal, and we don't know why. But we can still live with the hope that, he protected her from something, right? Or regardless, she's with him now. So, and if Allie Jean had a choice to come back to mama, she wouldn't. She is in the most perfect place. Like, yes, we've walked through a lot of sadness and even some anger and just questioning, but we have so much hope knowing that where she is today is just perfect, right? So walking up to making the decision to take her off of life support, the doctors there were they incredible, Sammy. We were just met with so many incredible medical staff. I can't even begin to explain all the different little God hugs and nuggets that we had gotten along the way. But this doctor, told us that they've exhausted all of the options that they had surgically, and from a lung and a heart perspective, you cannot, at least medically today, it is extremely difficult to operate on a heart with not good working pair of lungs, and then vice versa. And so he told us that they could look for other heart surgeons who would try, but the likelihood of her passing away in transportation or on an operating table was extremely high. And so we just said, you know what, we want to hold her. And if God decides to heal her when those tubes come off, we will rejoice and walk all there is to come with that. And then if he chooses to take her, we will, mourn and be sad, but we will still have hope in a future, right? And so um the day came that it was just like the next day we had said, okay, we wanted some family to meet her, because this is day 7 of life, and some of our family had come into town, and so we got to have a little you know they got to meet her in her room, which was another miracle in and of itself, because of the specific part of the hospital that she's in is extremely locked down with like sicknesses and stuff, because we're talking, lung issues, a lot of respiratory stuff. So the family got to meet her, and then at I don't remember exactly what time, but they picked her off the table and put her in Ken's arms, and we did a little family photo shoot with Alana, got to be in there, which is another huge blessing. So Alana got to meet her little sister, and then they moved her from his arms to my arms and took the breathing tube out. And that little girl fought for like 2.5 hours. And I just got to hold her, and they were explaining to me what would happen if she started, losing or the ability to like take those breaths and stuff. But the peace in this room was just God, right? So, um, you know, you wouldn't expect that holding your baby, knowing they could be her last moments, that you could fall asleep. But Allie Jean and I took a little nap together. So I kind of teased the medical staff that I got to co-sleep with her. And in the medical world, that's like a huge no-no, is co-sleeping. But I got to co-sleep with Allie, and it was just like so peaceful. And this Bible verse just kept coming up, like just where Jesus says in John 16:33, I have told you these things so that you may have peace in me. In this world we will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And I just was watching her breathing and just recognizing the trouble that she was struggling with, trying to take those last breaths. And then it was really sweet. I got to just say, take heart, honey. Like, and her heart's not even fully formed, but take heart, like he's overcome the world. And when you open those beautiful eyes in heaven, it's going to be just a beautiful moment for her. So, and something that we get to look forward to one day.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. It's so beautiful to think about a moment where you feel this immense grief and pain and loss to also be met with so much joy and excitement and hope for her full healing, right? Because in heaven, are you're whole and you're healed. And here on earth, we're not going to encounter that wholeness and full healing. Like, yes, Jesus can heal here on earth, but our full transformation and healing cannot be until we get to heaven. And so just to hear you talk about that moment where you're losing your daughter, but you're still so um, joyful for her because you know that she's going straight into the arms of her father where she's not going to feel any pain. And now you get to look forward to eternity with her, which this is a blimp for what eternity is going to be. And so from those moments, her testimony really has just started, and so I have two questions for you. The first one is, after that experience, how has the Lord really challenged you and grown you to use, I mean, you're already doing it, right? Through being here, like on the podcast and sharing and being so open, but like, how are you taking something, right, that the world would view as such a massive loss? How is she even talking about it? How does she have the strength? Right? It's so hard for people who don't have a relationship with Jesus to understand how you can even be having this conversation with me right now when it hasn't even been a year, since this kind of loss. What has God done in you since that?
Yeah, so prior to the prior to her funeral, Pastor Paul had asked, it was there something that we wanted to just kind of extend to people, out there who maybe wanted to help, right? And so I would say if you've met a mother who's walking this out and she doesn't have a huge support system, or you are part of her support system, obviously meals. And one thing I didn't know that would be such a huge blessing was like paper products. Just different things can be a huge help. But when you're talking about opening up her funeral to, anybody who wants to come, what can people realistically do? And there is a book that means a lot to me because it's a whole nother, side story, but there is a book on child loss and seeing the goodness of God through the shadow of suffering. And I personally know the author and the characters like in the story. This is not a fictional book. This is a true story. And this book just popped, came into my mind, and I said, I'd love for people to read it with me. And I want to walk through seeing the goodness of God in the shadow of suffering. And I felt like if I don't do this, for me personally, if I don't take these next steps to do this and be accountable to it soon, I will tend to compartmentalize. I did that for 9 years with the abortion, right? Like I knew I needed to take action quickly in order to start the healing journey. And so I we petitioned friends and family to read this book with us. And further, I committed to going online every 2 weeks to talk about the chapters. And so this is not for everybody. And I can tell you, I absolutely hated public speaking before. I'm starting to enjoy it and feel like I can come into it. Of course, I still get nervous, which is totally fine. But these live Facebook posts are out there for the world to go back and to watch. And so that's another resource, Sammy, that I can give you if there's somebody, who wants to walk through the book and go through these little book reviews in a much faster pace than what I did online. Um, but that helped jumpstart a healing journey that I am so grateful for, because without the accountability, I don't know if I would have, truly sat in the sadness of losing Allie Jean. Like 7 days with a little baby is a beautiful thing, but you always want more time, right? We always want more. And I think if you don't let yourself sit in hard things, you can get busy with the day to day, especially if you go back to work, especially if you find something to, keep yourself busy. That's not always the right answer. Sometimes we have to sit in the hard and we have to let, the blood of Jesus cover all of it. And if you can be mad at anyone, Jesus is the one who can take it. We can bring our anger, we can bring our fears, we can bring our hurts, we can bring all our full selves, to the foot of the cross. Yeah.
Mm. I'm reminded of that scripture that talks about, taking your mourning into dancing and, picturing like for some people it's a quicker, mourning into dancing, right? But for most in their healing journey, that's a process, and for you knowing that from this experience of losing Allie, the enemy could come meet you after that loss and like you were saying, compartmentalize, but you knew by the power of Jesus inside of you that you, in this moment, while you're still grieving, needed to take some action and rise up. And I was so blessed being a part of that book study, reading the book, watching you shine and thrive so boldly and publicly, inviting anybody who wanted to be a part into this book. And we can definitely put the link and the videos and all of that in the show notes here for people, or if you're watching this on social media, so that you can have resources. That was something really important that I wanted to bring attention to, is we're going to have a lot of resources for you, from abortion to even like foster care. I mean, we can add so many things below for anybody listening to this that finds themselves at one particular point that wants to take a next step. It's one thing to go through it or to experience or to live it. It's another thing to get into action with the information that you have that we're gonna have for you. But Amanda, I'd really love to end with you giving encouragement to any mother who's walking through what you just walked through, where she has maybe already experienced the loss of a child or a miscarriage or an abortion. I mean, there's so many different kinds of loss, but what would you say to the woman who's currently walking through a season where she is losing a baby, or she doesn't know that that may be a part of her story in the future, right? What would you say to Amanda from a year ago, Amanda, who had no idea what was coming?
Really is, lean on Jesus. It's really that simple. Um, like sit at the foot of the cross, right? So find a space to just sit with him, because yes, others are important and can help and come alongside, but there does come a time, 3 months later, where people forget, and it's natural, right? Or people don't know where you're at. And so it's important, like even in the heart of it, from sitting in this side of it, to be willing to talk about your baby, whether it's from a miscarriage or stillbirth or an infant loss. Like say their name. I actually just recently bought a necklace that I didn't it hasn't come in yet, but I got her name inscribed on a necklace. So if anybody ever asks me about my necklace, I get to talk about her. And,
Mm.
and that's such an important part of the healing, because um if you bring up your own baby, people will start to like, oh, I can ask a question, or I can, you know, invite conversation, right? Because people just don't know where you're at, they don't. But most importantly, like, there's got to be a space where it's just you and the Lord. If you don't have that time, I think it can be easy to fall into either, the compartmentalizing, or just a state of, despair, right? Without Jesus, like, we can fall into just absolutely just hopelessness.
Yeah.
So find your space. I have a specific space where I put my back to the wall and just slide down the wall. And that's where I go when I just need to cry, or I just need to even just sometimes thank the Lord for what he can do through hard things. So um yeah, find your space with Jesus.
That's so beautiful. I have my prayer closet. We all have our little spots where we got to go and sit in the uncomfortability, a lot of the times where we want to run and hide and avoid it. But the only way is through it. That
Mhm.
God can heal you as you go through it. And so that is so powerful, Amanda. I just want to thank you for your vulnerability and for your openness and for um, sharing what you've been through so that the listeners and the woman that can resonate with your story, they can see that there is hope for them, there is a future for them, that Jesus loves them, and that he doesn't want them to stay in a place of guilt or shame or condemnation. He wants to see them set free. And your testimony in every area is just such a revelation of heaven manifested here on earth. And it's not going to make sense to a lot of people who haven't received Jesus. And so we just want to encourage any of our listeners who are maybe struggling in this place to reach out to Amanda. Like, Amanda would love to hear from you. If you can resonate with any part of her story, God never wastes a hurt. And as she has gone through this and shared it so openly, it's to help you bring what you're hiding in the dark to light. And so please reach out to Amanda where she can really resonate with you, but help you. Help you in that space, and you can just have a trusted friend in her, and even in myself. We'd love to connect with you. We would love to pray for you, and I will put Amanda's contact info as well in the show notes below, so that if you have a testimony you want to share with her, you want to connect with her, you can send her an email at momanddadofalliejean@gmail.com, or go find her on Instagram at AMAMarie_87. And I'll make sure we have that linked below so it's easy for you guys to go connect with her. But Amanda, I just want to say thank you so much for this interview. I think it's going to bless many. The Lord knows who this message is to be for, that tuned into
This
this
is
today.
really how things live on, and how Allie's life lives on, and my first baby's life lives on. So just thank you for having me.
Of course. All right. Well, everyone listening, we will see you in the next episode as Hunter and I are continuing on with season 2, where we're taking the spotlight off of us and we are shining it on so many of the Lord's amazing children that he has taken from a place of darkness to a place of light. And Amanda, it was such an honor to kick off season 2 with your testimony that is going to impact so many people. So thank you to all of our listeners
Thank
and those watching on YouTube. We will see you guys in the next episode very soon. All right, goodbye, everyone.